Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Michelle, for moderating. Thanks to the Farmers Union and all the Farmers Union members here today for coming out. There's no more important issue in rural and northern Wisconsin than how we support our farms and how our farms stay prosperous. My name is Fred Clark. I'm a candidate for Congress. I bring to this job, or this role, a background with 36 years in Wisconsin as a forester, as a conservationist. I owned and operated my forestry management business out of a former dairy farm in Sauk County for many years. And I've traveled and worked all over the state on farm conservation and policy issues, both as a business owner, consultant, and as a state legislator. And today, we're facing another crisis in farm country. And all of us have to pay attention to what it takes to support and sustain a vibrant, sustainable farm economy for all of us. And Farmers Union has been a leader in that effort. I look forward to the conversation today to advance those goals. Thank you.
Welcome, and thank you for hosting us. As you know, we are running for Congressional District number 7. You may or may not know that that is all or part of 26 counties. So every time we have an opportunity to speak, you can count on me showing up. Getting to speak to farmers is even that much more exciting for me because I agree. We rely on farmers to fuel our bodies, and we owe it to you to make sure that you stay in business. I am very excited to answer the questions that we have today. Just a little bit about me. I am not a career politician. I am an attorney. I grew up in the district. I returned to the district after school. I've served the district as an elected city attorney, family court commissioner, guardian ad litem. I have always advocated for or issued decisions in the best interest of children. That includes having nutritious meals. And I look forward to talking more about your needs and wants from your congressional representative. Thank you.
Yeah, you got 2, right?
Okay.
All right.
Make sure it's on.
Hello.
This one's on.
There we go. Hello.
Yeah.
We got it. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Chris Armstrong from New Richmond, Wisconsin. I grew up north of a little village called Star Prairie, across the border in Polk County on the Apple River. Went to high school in Erie, Wisconsin. Went to UW-Madison and then University of Minnesota. Got my degree in astrophysics. I've been running my own IT business out of my house for the past 30 plus years. I guess from a farming perspective, grew up in the country, milked goats when I was a youngin', and it is actually almost 50 years to the day that I won the grand championship of the junior goat at the Polk County Fair. It was in 1976. And also, empty manure stalls and all that stuff. And of course, back in the day, picking rocks, helping with baling hay. And my mom was a veterinarian, so I did go on some milk feeder runs and calf pulls before she switched to small animal vets.
Is it still on? Okay. My name is Niina Baum. I grew up on a small dairy farm in Price County. My dad is actually here today. He was the farmer in the family. 3rd generation, right, I believe. And so farming and that industry is very personal for me. We saw a lot of the small farms that were around us growing up disappear, and small community, kind of dwindled along with it. I'm the only candidate that's lived almost my whole entire life in the district. I went to college in Ashland, Wisconsin, and I landed in Rhinelander, where I serve on the Town Planning Commission. I co-founded an organization to help keep young workers up in the Northwoods, and I brought $500,000 in economic impact to Oneida County through the events that I have organized. The Northwoods is home for me, and I'm running because I really want to make sure that we have a representative who knows it and understands it and loves it.
Amazing, thank you so much. We are going to move into the first section of questions on immigration reform. Farmers across northern and western Wisconsin consistently report difficulty finding enough workers to fill year-round and seasonal agricultural jobs. Many of these operations rely on migrant labor to remain economically viable. How do you assess the current agricultural labor shortage, and what specific federal policies would you support to ensure farmers have access to a stable workforce and that workforce is properly protected? For this question, we will start with Ginger Murray.
All right.
So 2 minutes?
90 seconds. All right, well, we certainly need to have folks working on your farms. Number one, I think when I was talking to folks who are in the union, I was talking mostly to small and medium-sized farms that often tend to be multi-generational. And the federal government, in my opinion, needs to allow for financing that allows you to afford to have the next generation step up and to be able to step up technology if that's what you choose to do. As it relates to immigration, I'm an attorney. I like to follow this little thing called the Constitution. That's one of the things I hope to take care of when you all hopefully send me to Washington, D.C. I do believe we need to make many changes, naturalization of folks who want to be citizens, and better policies for folks who want visas and need to be here for you to tend to your farms. There's so much more about immigration that I'm not going to go into the ICE issue because I'm thinking that's intended to be separate, but I will just say this. I happened to be in Minneapolis the day Alex Preddy was murdered. I've never seen such a situation where our Constitution was completely disrespected by the agents who were involved when the folks who were being attacked were just using their constitutional rights. Farming is necessary. My uncle owned a farm. He was able to operate it with his family, but I know we have bigger farms and I'm here to help you be able to keep employees so your farms keep running. Thank you. I don't know.
Chris Armstrong.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think step one is we got to abolish ICE. Having an organization that illegally and unconstitutionally is harassing and murdering people in the streets has got to be, it is an unreformable, unredeemable organization. I can't imagine what it's like to be a legal immigrant or a citizen that isn't white or an undocumented worker and the terror that people must face with this un-American regime. When it comes to immigrant workers, what I've heard is that getting workers to work the dairy farms in particular is really, really tough. There aren't a lot of Americans that are up for it, for whatever that's worth. And my understanding is, I think it's the H-2 visa program. It's a lottery, so that you're not guaranteed to get workers, so it's a chance, you're rolling the dice. It takes a lot of money. You got to involve lawyers. And it just seems like, if there are people willing to do the hard work to keep our dairy farms working, we should welcome them into this country and make it as easy as possible for people to bring them here and sustain operations.
Niina Baum.
The answer to this question really varies on the size of farm that you talk to. Small farms they don't love the idea of there being a lot of immigrant labor coming into the large farms. They feel it undercuts their ability to make a profit as a small farm. But I also realize that large farms are what produce a lot of our food and what we consume. We can't have one without the other. We have to have both, and we have to support and sustain both. So ultimately, I do approve of expanding the visa program for these larger farms to be able to get the work that they need. But we also need to make sure that we have policy that supports the small farms as well, that they don't get left behind and forgotten through all of this as well, and ensuring that they're able to make an actual living and profit off of being a small farm. And on that note, I also want to mention that right now with our immigration system, we have about over 3 million pending immigration cases, and there's only about 600 judges to see those cases and decide on them, meaning we have incredibly long backlogs. So people are waiting years to find out whether their immigration status will be approved want to actually save money in this process, reduce the deportations that are happening, then we need to look at what's actually causing this backlog, and that's the judges not having enough of them.
Thank you. Ms. Clark.
All right, so I know we'll talk later today about why so much farm consolidation means that most of our dairy production is on larger farms. And the reality for those larger farms is that something like 70% of the labor force is immigrants. And I have some good friends who are dairy farmers. Talking to my friend John Rosenau in Buffalo County, he's told me if I should raise my farm today, the first phone call I'm going to make is to their families at home in Mexico, and the second phone call is going to be to a livestock broker, because I'm selling the cows, because I can't keep 600 cows on this farm safely and humanely. That can't be milked. And that would be the crisis every farm, large farm in the state would be in if they didn't have immigrant labor. I cared enough about that issue to take a trip this past winter with 3 dairy farmers down to central Mexico. And the purpose of that trip is to visit their families of their employees on farms here in Minnesota and in Wisconsin. And we visited their wives and their mothers and their grandmothers and their children, and learned about the reality of people that come here and work for years at a time. And they literally can't go home. So they make phone calls every night while their children grow up at home in Mexico, when they send most of their paychecks home. It's a brutal system. We need to change that because it's inhumane and it's bad for our economy. We need to reform the H-2A visa system to allow year-round visas to meet the needs of Wisconsin farms, including our dairies.
Thank you. Councilors Wilson, you mentioned the H-2A visa program. This question is on that topic. The H-2A farm worker visa program has recently been updated with new guidance that suggests that the program is now available for dairy farmers to utilize. But this does not change the seasonal nature of the program, meaning that dairy farmers still don't have a program that supports year-round labor. Since dairy farming is year-round work, what is your solution to addressing the workforce shortages in dairy? And I will start with Chris Armstrong.
It seems pretty simple. Allow it to go all year round.
Short and sweet, right? And I'm gonna reiterate a little bit again. I mean, we have to make sure that we are keeping the small farms in mind with this. Ultimately, I do support a year-round visa program, but we also need to make sure that our small farms are not being undercut by this, and that their ability to profit and make a living off the work that they do themselves is not undercut by lower waged work. So I would like to maybe see a minimum standard in wage when it comes to bringing in these immigrant workers, so that they aren't undercutting small farms.
Yeah, it is simple to a point. The Congress needs to pass legislation to, number one, make the H-2A visa program available to year-round employers, and two, to assure that enough visas exist and can be issued to meet the demand that our large farms have. To Nina's point though, actually I think doing this will help fairness in employment, because right now there's too much risk of employee abuse, especially with employees that are simply flying under the radar. And there need to be paid a minimum wage, there need to be benefits, that needs to all be transparent and above board, and those employees need to be paying into our benefit systems so that it actually, other Americans who rely on Social Security and Medicare will benefit from that and benefit from them being here. Our economy relies so much on immigrants, both their presence in our communities and the work that they do. We'll all benefit if we make that system legal and transparent. It'll be more fair for everybody, and it'll help put business on a level playing field.
All right, I'm gonna try and divide this into 3 sections. First of all, as it relates to the visa, I agree, I don't understand why they decided it needed to be seasonal. I get it for like lodging and other places like that, but for farming, I think it should be year round. Number two, as it relates to wages, you all are a farming union. Unions tend to advocate for Davis-Bacon, where we have a prevailing wage rate. I think that adopting something like that so that we can make sure that everybody is being held to the same standard of what employees are paid makes perfect sense under the situation. The other component of it is if folks want to be here and work here all the time, we need to make naturalization an easier process. What Niina said I agree with as far as we don't have enough judges. Also, they could have commissioners, like I was a family court commissioner. We can have immigration assistants who can help to expedite that process. And finally, I would also like to see more opportunities for folks who don't want to go to four-year colleges and want to go from high school into farming to have the finances available for whatever education or technology they might need. One of the things that's happening is that the bigger farms have technology that reduces their labor needs because of all the things the technology makes available. I think we're gonna have a chance to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about financing.
Okay, and this is the final question on immigration. What would you say to a dairy farmer who is worried that losing immigrant workers could threaten the future of their farm? What specific action would you take in Congress to address that concern? And maybe this is a continuation of the thoughts that you guys have had so far.
Can you repeat that? I'm hearing a little bit of an echo, and so it's a little bit difficult.
What would you say to a dairy farmer who is worried that losing immigrant workers could threaten the future of their farm? What specific actions would you take in Congress to address that concern? And so starting with Niina on this question.
I think this, sorry, I just had to think for a second. we're not live televised, it's not quite so fast. I think this is where we want to make sure we're being proactive and not reactive. If we're in a situation where farms are losing labor that they need to continue going, then we did something wrong to begin with, because that shouldn't be happening. So I want to focus on actually being more proactive than reactive in this situation, and trying to think ahead and making sure we put policies in place that are actually going to sustainably help them keep moving forward and get the work that they need. As we had mentioned, or as one of them mentioned before about the education component, a lot of people who want to get into farming or are interested in it don't know anything about it. There aren't the opportunities that there used to be when I was a kid to really understand the industry and learn from it and become a part of it. So I would want to look at more avenues for encouraging it as a career path for individuals as they grow up and move down the road, and making sure that that opportunity for mentorships, education, and everything are there for them to pursue this as a career.
Yeah, I think that is a huge worry and a huge risk for dairy farmers, especially as we've seen how federal immigration agencies have been out of control in the last year and a half. And so I think farms are needing to manage risk. But reforming needs to a visa system is the single biggest lever that Congress could pull and that we need to pull. We've talked about that. I agree with Ginger that allowing more pathways to naturalization as citizens for people that have lived and worked in this country for years, and that could include amnesty for people who have been here undocumented but who have followed the law, have worked hard and held jobs and done everything that employers ask them to do. And finally, we need to continue to incentivize young people who are born and raised here in our communities to stay in and enter farming. You know, all of us who went to dairy breakfasts in the month of June, I was so inspired by filling applesauce cups with a 12-year-old Future Farmers of America leader who was directing me for an hour and a half on how to fill those applesauce cups with confidence and with class. And I thought, wow, that's what growing up on a farm does. We need to continue all the programs that would help incentivize and encourage young people to be part of our farming community.
So number one, immigration. We need to tackle the issues with ICE. I'm not saying that we have to defund them, we have to reform them. Law enforcement is supposed to abide by rules. We have a constitution that requires due process. You can't assume someone is an illegal immigrant until there's been due process with a hearing and a judicial decision. Number two, we can't have ICE officers who violate our 4th and 5th Amendment rights against unreasonable search and seizures while citizens are exercising their 1st Amendment right to freedom and assembly and or their 2nd Amendment right to a concealed carry weapon. It's absolutely ridiculous, and that needs to be reformed, revised, and completely restarted. Number two, on the issue of reform, as I already said, we need to reform both the visa and naturalization process so we can be more inclusive, more appropriate for being year-round, and naturalization so we can be more efficient. Number three, we need to build security for those folks who are multi-generational, smaller mom-and-pop farms. We need to uplift them and invest in them, help them be able to keep up with the technology by offering low interest rate loans with graduated payment plans, while still keeping some funds for the safety net. But in my history, we've talked more about having funds available for the natural disasters. I'd like to use federal funds to support investment in farms, especially small farms.
One of the things I think that's been pretty cool about all of our, joint appearances is it occurs to me, perhaps to you guys as well, as everybody has lots of great suggestions. So I think if we could take the best of what all four of us have to offer, we might be in pretty good shape. It's a darn shame you can't elect all four of us. But I think just to summarize again, abolish ICE. It is not reformable. The people that murdered Alex Preddy were not new hires. It was not a training problem or a vetting problem. They were 7 and 12-year veterans. It is a corrupt organization, and it has to be torn down and rebuilt from scratch. We need immigration enforcement, but not in this way. As far as the risk for dairy farmers and other farmers, it just seems ridiculous to me. I just can't imagine what it's like to try to run a business that requires a certain amount of manual labor, and you cannot find that labor, and the federal government is, inhibiting and prohibiting you to do that. What kind of partnership is that? So it doesn't apply just to dairy farms. I'm sure you guys have heard stories of, people that are growing, fruits and row crops that they've had to destroy. I think, peach trees, for example, had to be destroyed because they don't have any people to pick them. I think, not only, making the voucher program year-long is essential, and again, increasing, number of immigration judges, getting rid of the lottery. It needs to be needs-based, not random-based. And there was one more thing, and time is up.
Great, thank you. Before we move on to the next section, you have the opportunity to have an additional 30 seconds to give any final thoughts on the topic of immigration reform before we move into antitrust and market consolidation. So I'll start again with the order of
I think the most important thing I'd want to emphasize is all of us who understand the contributions that immigrants make to our communities through their culture, through their food, through their ways of life, and through the economic contributions that immigrants make in all sorts of different forms, from healthcare to dairy farms to the service sector and construction. We're a nation of immigrants. We will be poorer, and we will be less able to live the lives that we want to live without immigrants in our communities. We need to help people recognize that.
How many seconds? 30. Okay.
Yeah.
I can barely say thank you in 30. All right, here we go. I've said enough about the reform that I think that we need. I want to talk about when I was able to meet with the 3rd generation at the Nelson farm in Barron for the June dairy. month. This young college graduate explained to me how difficult it is to find people to work. Our government, everybody who lives here, relies on farmers for nutritious food. As a government, we have to support you. The end.
As Fred said, we are a nation of immigrants. I don't know about you guys. My family wasn't born here. My great-great-grandfather came over from Germany in the 1830s, took a steamer across the Atlantic into New Orleans, took a paddle wheel up the Mississippi River to St. Paul, and got into the fur trapping business with the Native Americans and French voyageurs. And with 8 other German Jewish families, established the first synagogue in the territory of Minnesota. And not only do immigrants do a lot of the hard work, they're also the greatest source of entrepreneurs and starters of new business.
I think we also need to look at what is the root cause, what is really driving the need for immigrant labor, why are our own residents and citizens here not wanting to get into the industry. And I'm going to use dairy farming for an example. The price for milk has not changed in 20, 30 years to reflect the raising the cost. So it's very hard for a small farm to make it anymore. So that is why there's been a drive for this lower cost labor as well.
Thank you so much. Before we move to the next section, I want to just acknowledge with the attendees, if you do have questions as you sit here today, you can text the phone number present on some of the table texts, 715-450-6431 is present on some of the tests, and I can also direct to the questions at the end of the day today. So if you like ask a question, that's an opportunity. Next, we're going to move into antitrust and market consolidation. The 2022 Census of Agriculture reported 1.9 million farms in the U.S., which is down 7% from 5 years prior and the lowest number on record. Yet during that time, the average farm size increased 5% to 463 acres, reflecting a continued trend of consolidation of small and medium-sized farms into larger enterprises. How will you help Wisconsin's farmland transfer to the next generation of farmers, especially those historically marginalized, instead of being consolidated or developed?
Am I?
Yes.
Okay. That was a big lead-in for this question, but I think the point is the number of farms have gone down while the size of farms have gone up.
Yes.
And so I think it has a lot to do with helping financially to support the smaller farms to be competitive. I am socially progressive while fiscally responsible, and so I understand when I say that we need to offer financing for smaller farms that has to come from somewhere, and it needs to be something that's going to grow business. I was fortunate enough to get student loans, and so because of that I was able to go to college and then go on to law school, and I've been giving back to my community ever since. I am absolutely confident that if we invest in farmers, that the same thing will happen. And so like student loans, I think we should be giving low interest rate loans to folks who need it to advance their technology or to expand their land or their labor, and then allow them to pay it back on graduated payment plans as their profits grow. I think being able to finance that is important. Also, I think what we need to do then is for folks who are using that financing, any federal institution that provides food or meals should allow folks who are on our financing program to have priority in getting bids for being the place that provides the produce and milk for federal institutions. Thank you.
So the question is about consolidation of farms of all flavors, right? So I think this is a real challenge. Namely, we're seeing the same thing happen in all industries, right? Acquisitions, mergers. I mean, we're seeing in the media landscape, right, with Paramount Discovery right now, or whatever the companies are. So, you know, I guess, you know, because I know one of my good friends, you know, has a family farm, but it's him, his brothers, his father, and his uncle. You know, it is a family corporation. They have grown by acquiring other farming buildings and land. I think one of the real challenges facing farmers today has got to be the escalating price of operating a farm. I mean, again, you know, I think some of these machines, you know, cost, you know, $1 million+ dollars. How is a small farm? You know, 168, you're supposed to afford that. I don't know. Are there ways that we can, through, you know, antitrust legislation, limit the size of farms? Is that a good idea? I'm not sure. I'm sympathetic to, you know, new farmers that want to start. I think we should be able to give them, you know, some leg up, you know, to get started and get going. But I think it's a you know, a tough question. But ultimately, you know, I'm pretty sure we don't want to end up at a place in the future where there's only one farm.
I think one of the most impactful and feasible things that we can do right now to ensure that farmland continues into the next generation is adjusting the capital gains tax to account for inflation. We all know that the barn that was built 20, 30, 50 years ago has not gone up in value in that time. If anything, it's depreciated. So when you go to sell your farm to that next farmer, that next generation, and then you get that in, so if you bought the farm for $200,000 and you go to sell it for $1.2 million, you are being capital gains tax on that $1 million when most of that is inflation and not actual value that has gone up. That is the number one thing that we need to address right away and make sure that is not negatively impacting our farmers when they go to transfer land to the next generation.
You're asking 10-minute questions.
Right.
I think the biggest, you know, when we look at farm consolidation and farms getting bigger and bigger, it's easy to point to those farms as the problem. They're not the problem. These are farms trying to survive in a market where margins are thinner and thinner and thinner. And the people who are making money consistently is big agribusiness. The wholesalers, the consolidators, the meat packers, the processors, they're the ones that stay profitable. We have failed in a bunch of ways. I noted back in February, a group of 28 current and former farm leaders wrote a letter to Congress, and I noted this quote. It said, "The policies of this administration have caused tremendous harm to U.S. agriculture. Farmer bankruptcies have doubled, and barely half of all farms will be profitable this year, and the U.S. is running a historic agricultural trade deficit." So there's, I think, three big factors here. One is deregulation, not enforcing the monopoly laws that we have and not making them stronger when they need to be. The second is unstable markets and the tariff war that's made it almost impossible for people to make money because of chaos in our markets, wiping away years of farmer efforts. We need to help farms diversify. We need to enforce antitrust laws. We need to get back to federal policy that helps assure stable markets so we're not bailing out farmers for the chaos and the mess that we've created. And farming needs to diversify. We can't have everybody stuck in corn and beans and dairy and lose money at it and expect this market to be stable.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Many farmers report that they are price takers rather than price makers,
Yep.
facing rising input costs while having limited bargaining power in increasingly consolidated markets. Do you believe the current antitrust laws and federal oversight are sufficient to ensure fair competition in agriculture? If not, what changes would you advocate for in Congress? And I will start with Chris Armstrong.
All right, so as Fred said, you know, it's got to be pretty darn tough and pretty demoralizing going, particularly for people that are, you know, planting row crops, and go into a season knowing you're not going to make any money. I mean, I just can't imagine what that's got to be like. And as many of you may know, certainly better than I, not being a farmer, but a lot of the bridge payments that are coming out, you know, for as a patch to this illegal tariff regime, a lot of that money goes to the suppliers. I mean, the farmers don't get too much of that, from what I hear. I think, antitrust enforcement, it has really been lax for quite some time across many industries. And I think it's definitely needs to be re-examined. So I'm not sure, to be quite honest, if it's a legislative issue or if it's a executive issue on actually bringing suits. I was advised by one farmer to be a little careful about the antitrust nature, and particularly the farming business as it related to one particular company, that it would end up providing a benefit to international competitors, which could not necessarily be to the benefit of American farmers. But I think it's a complex thing, and big agribusiness. The family farms, the people that are doing the work, I think should be getting most of the profit, not the meat packers, meat producers, so forth.
Niina.
Okay, I'm gonna use a specific example for this question, so I can only get through it quickly. More time. So when I was a child, when my dad decided to get out of milking, the price for milk was $20 per 100, and then it dropped to $10 per 100 overnight. It is currently today around 16 to 17 per 100 here in Wisconsin. So that really has not changed in that time frame. But we have seen, the price in the grocery store change. Antitrust laws have not been enforced very well for a long period of time, and we're seeing the effects of that. But why haven't they been enforced? Well, there's no accountability, and that ultimately stems from the fact that you have these very large corporations with special interests that are funding our candidates, funding their campaigns to make sure that policy benefits them and doesn't actually benefit the people in the district and the people in the industries that are supporting us every single day. And so that's why we have to look at who are we electing and change the type of people that we're electing to office to make sure they're actually representing us and making sure that these antitrust things, this consolidation, and I'm, in another example, when we get to seed companies, if we meant to touch on that, I'll get into it further. That's a whole nother area where this is happening as well. So again, we need to look at who we're electing to office and make sure that we're electing people who are not taking special interest money.
Right, so it seems that it doesn't matter how big you get, if you're losing $5 or $6 per hundredweight on milk, you can't make it up on volume, right? And so, eventually, if we don't reform this system, everybody's gonna be out of business, and we'll be trying to figure out something else to grow. So we've talked about the almost crisis in monopoly power and our government's failure to enforce that. And then we also need to look at all of the ways in which government sort of locks in growers and producers around crops, around crop insurance, and around pricing. I sat and talked with a dairy farmer this winter who had an MBA, and I said, explain the federal milk marketing order system to me. And he said, I got an MBA in ag economics, and my professor couldn't explain it to me. So we've got a really dysfunctional system right now that screws everybody. And Farmers Union, to your credit, is advocating, I think, moving toward congressional policy to reform that into I think you're calling it a producer-led or a farmer-led price discovery system. There's a rational way to do this. We make these rules up. They didn't come out of the Bible or out of the clouds. We make this stuff up. We can make it up differently in a way that's more fair for everybody, and we have to.
Even before I went to law school, while I was at UW-Madison, I started studying economics and the law. And so when you're at the 500 level classes, they taught monopolies and oligopolies and antitrust. And so things that you look for and that our government is supposed to enforce is if there's price fixing. Another aspect that you're supposed to be looking for and taking care of is if there's barriers to entry. And so I think there's more, but I think those are the two that are most commonly faced in your profession as a farmer. Because you're being told what you can charge for your product. And when I was talking to a gentleman while waiting to take the ride around the farm, he told me that he has to pay an and I think it was like $5,000 for someone to come and pick up his milk, his product, to take it to where it was going. And I thought that doesn't make sense to me. But when a mom and dad or mom and pop farm can't fill the truck, then they have to make multiple trips. And so he explained it to me very well. And so that's part of the problem of the barrier to entry. When technology costs so much and the big corporations, when they one up to the next advancement, they won't even turn in their equipment so that mom and pops can buy it at a used price. We have to help make that a level playing field so that you all can be competitive. I'll help with that.
Thank you so much. Many small and mid-sized farmers are struggling due to rising costs, agricultural consolidation, and a lack of antitrust enforcement. In the U.S., the 4 largest multinational corporations have gained a total of 71% of the pork market, 85% of the beef market, 90% of the grain market. Additionally, 4 corporations account for at least 75% of grocery sales of most common grocery items. Agribusiness consolidation is squeezing small and mid-sized farmers on all sides. Wisconsin farmers are facing record consolidation among meat packers, seed companies, fertilizer suppliers, and processors. What specific federal action would you take to increase competition for farmers?
That was like a really, really long question. There were so many components to it. I'm like, oh, I kind of stopped writing.
It's a 3-minute question.
So can you help just with a little bit? Like I got the numbers, but leading into that, so there's rising costs, there's lots of consolidation. There was something in between those two?
A lack of antitrust enforcement
Thank you.
in like the 4 major aspects of the ag industry.
Okay.
So seeing kind of
Yes.
consolidation across the board, and then specific to
Wisconsin consolidation in meat packing, seed companies, fertilizer, and processors.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
What specific federal actions would you take to increase competition for farmers in Wisconsin? And I think we would start with you this time. Thank you.
Oh, we have this one.
Okay, well, so we touched on that in the earlier questions, but we need to strengthen and enforce anti-monopoly and antitrust laws, and that may mean forcing some of these companies to break up. We've done it before. We did it with Bell Telephone in 1978. The government has that power, and there's a reason that happens, and it makes a more fair market for everybody. So let's start there. But another factor here that you touched on in that question is just the cost of production and market access. Did anybody not lose money growing soybeans in Wisconsin last year? And so there's almost a tragedy here that farmers who spent hundreds of millions of dollars of their own money in these checkoff programs to send trade missions to China to buy soybeans and milk marketing missions have seen that wiped away almost overnight by this president and this administration with a chaotic tariff war. That's destroyed markets overnight that took decades to develop. And there's no amount of bailout is going to make farmers whole for that loss. So we need a trade policy that's actually stable and sustainable. And finally, we need to get out of foreign wars that make diesel fuel so expensive that nobody who relies on tractors or trucks or equipment to operate is losing money. We have to stop the foreign war insanity.
Thank you. Ginger.
Fred got to say everything first, but well done, Fred. The rising costs, the tariffs did not help farmers. Tariffs did not help very many small businesses. I haven't talked to anyone who said tariffs were helpful. So tariffs, from what I learned, were intended to help make our domestic producers more competitive with foreign companies and their prices. However, this administration got it very wrong. So not only did you get the added cost of tariffs for what you needed to be able to purchase and the steel that goes into your silos and whatnot, and it also aggravated our foreign purchasers who stopped buying your product. We just need someone in government who can get along with other people. I settle 90% of my divorce cases. When people absolutely can't stand looking at each other, I can get them to the table and help them settle. You need someone who can do that. We need to increase competition, and part of that is making your business more affordable, helping you make sure that you have yourself and your team fully insured and having access to affordable quality health care. The other thing is we need to have a campaign for you and reinvent you as someone who sells delicious, healthy products to the people who live here.
All right, so this is about antitrust, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So, like I said earlier, this, increased aggregation of smaller companies by bigger companies is not limited to the ag business. I echo what Niina said earlier, that the people that are getting politicians elected through their contributions through PACs, these very wealthy companies, to get policies that are beneficial to them, that are detrimental to us and farmers, I think is, again, a big, huge part of the problem. So, Citizens United needs to go away. There needs to be a new amendment to the Constitution that says corporations are not people and money is not speech. I think, again, it gets back to enforcement, as well as my understanding is, like, at least in the meat packing business, I think there's also a high level of foreign ownership of American meat packing companies. We do want, one of the cool things about America is that it does attract global capital, but I think we need to, be mindful of the side effects of that. But ultimately, it just seems like, the federal government is putting their finger on the scale, helping big business, and the little guy just gets no relief at all. And I think that's completely upside down. I'll admit, not sure what the policy, the legislation solutions are, but I'm sure we can figure it out.
Well, I feel old because I have a newspaper up here with me today. It is the Country Today. My dad actually gave it to me because there was a really good article in here about consolidation in the seed industry. And basically what's happened is that it started genetically modified seeds in the 90s, and companies like Bayer, they were able to patent those seed varieties and genetic modifications. And so then independent, small seed developers eventually they would have to do the same thing, but then they would get bought up and consolidated, and now all of those varieties and patents are all housed under one big company known as Monsanto or Bayer. And that has now made it incredibly nearly impossible, or really difficult for small, independent seed developers to enter into the market and provide competition. Because if they have any sort of one of those varieties, or variations, it's already patented. Now they have to pay certain fees and things to be able to utilize it. So we have to break that up. The antitrust laws have not been enforced properly, and we need to take a harder stance on that. And if elected, that would be one of my priorities.
Thank you so much. This is the final question in the consolidation section. Do you think the federal government has a role in helping farmers bring their products to market? And if so, what would be your plan to support the development of domestic, local markets for farm products in Wisconsin for family farmers? I will start with Ginger Marie.
Thank you. The Forest Service, I think, did it right. They brought Smokey the Bear into our grade schools to teach us only you can prevent fires. I'd like to see, cutesy cow come into the grade school and talk about all the amazing things that farmers do. When I went to so there's the union that we went to first in Star Prairie, and then we went to the Federation. And at the Federation, there were these two girls, and I said, what do you like best about living on a farm? Without hesitation, everything. Like, can you imagine this little girl coming in with cutesy cow to talk to the kids in the school to get them fired up about what amazing things happen on our family farms? Take that and then add to it. Got milk, right? We don't hear things like that anymore. There's so many people in personal training who are all about get your protein, get your protein. Guess what? Milk is right there. And who doesn't love chocolate milk? Like, I think we just need to work with the farmers on a campaign like that. If we have a Department of Forest Service who can have Smokey Bear, we can have a Department of Agricultural that can help you with cutesy cow and get milk in the vending machines in the school and bring cutesy cow into the schools and help rebuild family farms in Bible.
Let's see, so, well, just want to recognize I am doing my part to support the dairy industry because I drink about a half a gallon of milk every day. Seriously, except when I'm on the road. And as you might know, strange scientific fact, did you know that being lactose intolerant as an adult is normal for most species? So, you know, us that drink milk as adults, humans, we are the oddballs in the mammalian world. I think when it comes to pricing, again, you know, like others have said before, this insane tariff regime is doing nobody any favors at all. So again, you know, the markets that have been destroyed, you know, wanting to buy beef from cheap beef from Argentina when prices are high, which is, you know, not the greatest thing for consumers, but might not be a bad thing for beef producers. I also think that, you know, restoring SNAP benefits, again, a lot of that U.S. Department of Agricultural program for providing, you know, healthy food across the nation, you know, that is a big market domestically for farmers. I think, you know, the destruction illegally of U.S. aid by Elon Musk, again, killed an international market. And then, you know, I think, you know, we got, as other people have said as well, we need to diversify. The federal government has an opportunity with state partners to, you know, facilitate new markets. And again, get local growers to get those products, you know, to local schools and people that are in need. So there's a lot of opportunities.
The question was ultimately, should the government play a role in bringing the farmer products to the market?
Yes,
Correct.
do you believe in helping farmers bring their products to market, and if so, your plan on developing that market?
First of all, I just want to make a quick statement on the Got Milk campaign. That is the type of stuff that's supposed to be happening through the dairy checkoff program that the dairy farmers contribute to already. And there was actually a lawsuit brought against the government on the checkoff program because they felt that a lot of farmers felt that the money paying into it wasn't going to things like promoting the product, it was going to other research that wasn't pertinent to making their products more relevant and bringing those into the market. I'm actually the only Republican here today, and I think that's pretty disappointing to see that my colleagues were not here today. And so I am definitely a believer of limited government. I don't think it's always the government's job to do everything. But if we do things properly in the way that it should be done, we shouldn't have to interfere in, you know, helping bring products to the market necessarily. And so if we can break down the farm bill so that it is actually understandable and it's not the massive amounts of different things included in there and all lumped together, if we could actually break it down into individual issues and policies and pieces that we can address and decide based on what is actually needed, I think we could actually have a lot more positive impact without necessarily having to step in and facilitate other things to bring products to the market.
That is the end of this section, so I do have
I
the
think I get the answer.
Yeah, we didn't answer
Oh,
that.
you didn't answer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's right, great question. You know, this had me thinking about drinking beer in the late 1970s when there was about 5 kinds of beer that you could buy in the country, maybe 8. And today, my God, there are thousands. And so just think about the kind of change that's possible, okay? And I think it's relevant here. All of that market control that those meat packers and everybody else exercises, and it's reinforced by government policy, for better or worse. But right now, we could be incentivizing more diverse markets for farm products. Right now, a lot of food pantries in the state are using grant money to help bring farm products to food pantries around the state. We need to do more of that. We need more farm-to-school programs. We need to incentivize small-scale producers such as abattoirs that could help, I think I pronounced it right, that can help provide meat processing, mobile meat processing for people that are raising grass-fed beef or even buffalo. There are some small levers, relatively small levers we could pull that would help diversify market opportunities for producers and make better, healthier food and more diverse food choices available to consumers. And I want to see government, to me, that's the work government should be doing that would benefit all of us. Thank you. Yeah, I don't drink beer anymore. I'm sorry about that.
Sorry.
You're gonna have my beer.
Oh, I love, these are great.
Now that is the end of this section.
So then we
You
get
have
our
an
30 seconds.
additional 30 seconds for closing remarks and final thoughts on antitrust legislation and market consolidation. So we will start with Chris Armstrong then.
Amazing.
Additional thought. I don't know, I mean, quite honestly, I think we've covered it pretty darn good. I don't really have anything to add.
Oh, we have a hand raised.
I think one thing we've got to actually remember too, is the organic movement, which has pretty well taken care of their own system of marketing, and control of their milk. They want milk that they produce, their product. And if you are an organic producer, if you produce too much, that's another problem. If you flood the market, your price is gonna die.
Thank you so much.
No, if you just kind of
So, we
30
have,
seconds.
you're still in, you haven't started yet.
No, but
Okay.
I'll just use what he said.
Thanks so much. So, move it further.
Niina, I want to just echo something you said. I began to learn about this years ago. The way that farm producers have been struck to become less independent. And one great example is hybrid seed. There was a time when you grew corn, when farmers collected their seed from the best plants and regrew it, and basically were cultivating improved seed varieties year after year after year. And they didn't have to go to the market to buy seed every year. Well, guess where all the U.S. research money went? To grow hybrid seed so that farmers would have to go to the market every year to buy it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Didn't feel like it.
30 seconds. I do have more to say. I come from the financial perspective because I had a family member who had a farm. We all were proud of him for having a farm, and he lost it to bankruptcy. And so that is the perspective that I saw happen, and I want funds available to invest, not to provide relief. SNAP benefits should be able to be used at farmers markets. And locally, places where you can sell it locally, we need to have more of those.
Thank you.
Time though. 30 seconds is not very much time. All right, I'll just keep carrying this topic over to the next time.
So we have the option up to you guys, if you want a short break, like 2 to 3 minutes to use the facility to get water, or if you'd like to move into general.
Keep rolling. Yes, let's do
You
it.
guys feel fine?
Moving into general questions. Farming is already a stressful occupation, both physically and mentally. According to the National Rural Health Association, rural populations have a significantly higher suicide rate than urban areas, and the suicide rate among farmers is 3.5 times higher than the general population. What is your plan to holistically support farmers and rural mental health, and to ensure that the support services are appropriately resourced? We'll start with Niina.
I think some of this also stems from just access to good healthcare in general. We gotta start at the struggle with access to good healthcare. I have to purchase my own insurance as I own my own business in the marketplace, and it basically cost me more to have my insurance than if I didn't. I had to get some medical procedures done, and because I had insurance, my deductible is crazy high. I had to pay a much higher rate because I was technically insured, rather than if I hadn't been insured, my cost and my bill would have been way, way lower, and I would have came out ahead actually not having insurance. That right there creates a big financial burden and financial stress on people, and I think that is probably one of the root causes to degrading mental health as well. And so I don't think, implementing universal healthcare is practical in such a large country at this point, but I want to look at ways that we can impact healthcare right now. And that would be reforming our pharmacy benefit managers to ensure that our small independent pharmacies continue to be in our areas, and then that we also look at price transparency so that you can price shop and that there is actual competition in our pricing, and looking at consolidation of our small clinics.
Thank you. Fred Fox.
Yeah, that's a really important question, and I think you could, start at the sort of crisis level, and we need to make sure that we're investing in crisis support networks for farmers and in farm communities, and that can include hotline, it can include access to mental health support. And what echoes Nina's point about the critical need for adequate health care, which farmers are predominantly have been dependent on the Affordable Care Act as self-employed people. We need to make sure that access to affordable health care is strong. It's why I support a public option, a federally run public option that's available to everyone. But to the root of the issue, imagine being a third, fourth, fifth generation farmer, and you're the one who couldn't make a go of it financially when your father and your grandfather and your great-grandparents could. Think about the stress that causes. And I just think about everybody's making money in this damn system except farmers. The agribusiness and the processors and the meat packers and everybody selling your food in the convenience store are making money consistently and reliably and generating healthy profits while farmers aren't. And a high suicide rate is one of the side effects. It's one of the root effects of that broken system, and we need to figure out how to fix it.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that farmers were at 3.5, but I'm in a profession as a lawyer that also has a high suicide rate. So I know what we've done is we've emphasized prevention and networking and support that's available at all times. When I explained that when I came back to Forest County after going to law school, I was city attorney and town attorney and family court commissioner in 2 counties, and I had my own office. What I didn't tell you, but which you probably understand, those are all part-time and they don't come with benefits. So I went many years without health insurance, and I know how scary that was. Now I own my own office called Your Family Law Center, and all of my employees have health insurance, vision insurance, dental insurance, short-term disability, long-term disability. Like, I never want to see someone in the situation I was in. It was awful. The Congress has a responsibility to take care of the basic needs of the people who put them in power. Everyone deserves to have access to affordable, quality health care. I think the easiest thing is to repeal everything this administration did and get back to the Affordable Care Act and build from there. I will only be one of 435 people, and folks that have been there have already been putting together bills. Whether it's Medicare for all or the public option, it doesn't make a difference to me as long as it's affordable and it takes care of the people so that I can say I did the job that I promised to do for you. Yeah, time's up. I have so much more to say, but I respect everybody else's time.
Well, farmers that I know are drawn to their connection to the land, their animals, and it's just a part of their moral character of their fiber. And like I said before, I just can't imagine what it's like going into a growing season knowing that there's no chance, to get ahead. So the federal government has got to keep their fingers off the scales. There's a lot of the stuff that we talked about before, whether it's tariffs or consolidation, it's all these things that make it so tough for farmers to succeed. I think when it comes to healthcare, there are people that feel that you need to work in order to get healthcare, and I think that is completely freaking backwards. You need to be mentally and physically healthy in order to work. And again, small businesses, it's very difficult and expensive to get quality health care. We need to, again, address the stigma of mental health, of mental health disease and getting help for it. It's a really tough thing. I mean, when you break your leg, it's pretty obvious you broke your leg because your bone's sticking out of your skin. And people say, go to the hospital and get your leg fixed. We have serious stigma in that regard, and we gotta have infrastructure in the most rural district in Wisconsin so that it doesn't take 2 hours to drive to a physical hospital or a mental health clinic. Yeah.
Many rural communities in Wisconsin are facing the closure of local hospitals. These closures lead to longer travel times in healthcare facilities and reduced access to necessary care. As the average age of farmers climbs to 55 years old, the need for robust healthcare access in rural areas is only increasing. How would you address Wisconsin's rural hospital closures crisis and ensure that Wisconsinites have affordable access to the care they need when they need it? And we'll start with Red Flag.
And of course, the access to care in rural communities goes for everybody, not just farm producers, but it touches all of us, and it's another crisis. And our healthcare system had big holes in that safety net before 2025, and that net is falling apart today. The almost $1 trillion that's going to be cut out of the Medicaid program at the end of this year is going to be a gut punch to rural clinics and rural hospitals. It's going to force more closures. It's going to force more providers to leave communities, and that will reduce access to care for every single one of us, regardless of where we get our health coverage. We can't afford to let that happen. So, number one, we need to restore Medicaid funding. Number two, we need to recognize the financial burdens that rural hospitals and clinics have because it's more inefficient to provide services to a smaller number of people, which is the nature of rural healthcare. So having supplemental payments that basically help compensate a rural clinic for staying open when the direct patient care revenue isn't enough to support that, we need to look at changing those formulas because we need these clinics in our community. This is a strategic, moral, critical need for the quality of life in rural Wisconsin. And the federal government is going to have to figure out how to solve that problem.
This question really requires more than 90 seconds, but I'll give you what I can in 90 seconds. First of all, I'll speak from a conversation I was able to be a part of. There was a gal who was living in Minocqua with her husband, and she was a med student, and it was time for her to do her residency, and she really wanted to do it in that area. The doctors are so overworked that there was no one available to mentor her. So she's gonna have to go learn somewhere else. We are already competing with the higher wages that are paid in Madison and Milwaukee and Green Bay. So what I know about this is I had the same situation as an attorney, and I don't mean to sound elitist, but I had the same problem about how do we bring professionals to rural Wisconsin. I had an office that sat empty for 3 years. I talked to Wisconsin State Bar. They created a program. They incentivize employers to pay more and think outside of the box by providing housing, help provide the cost of the move. We need to do that for doctors and nurses and chiropractors and people who treat health and not just illness, to bring them to this area. Our indigenous friends are building, remodeling, increasing. Build it and they will come. If you have those fantastic facilities, the people will come. Also, we need to just educate folks who go to school in Madison, Milwaukee, and Green Bay about what a beautiful place we have. Get them up here for their summer internships. This year I have 2 interns. I think they're gonna stick around and be lawyers in our rural community. We can do that with our hospitals as well.
So, you know, kind of answered the question, the previous question, but, again, Wisconsin, the 7th district is the most rural district. We need federal and state subsidization to get the 21st century infrastructure that we deserve as human beings living up here. I mean, it should not take driving 1 or 2 hours to go to get emergency care, go to see an OBGYN and give birth. I mean, it's just not fair, in my opinion. We also, like Ginger said, we need to figure out a way to attract, because we need to have buildings, but buildings don't do us any good if we don't have any doctors, or nurses, or assisted care providers, or long-term care providers. So we got to be able to recruit and attract people to this district. That could include loan forgiveness programs, perhaps, but you know, a lot of those people are going to be younger folks starting their lives out, you know, in their families. So it gets back to kind of a fundamental issue of, you know, what does, you know, are we going to be able to provide what it takes for a family to start, you know, their lives here, buy a house, get affordable health care themselves, you know, modern infrastructure, and, you know, be able to raise their children in a, you know, safe, clean environment. So it's you know, it's a multi-dimensional perspective, but you know, again, just because we live up here, you know, in the boonies, doesn't mean we don't deserve 21st century healthcare.
So I just got done, recording my answers as I go. I just got done biking 400 miles to the 7th Congressional District as part of my campaign to really get to know the community, slow down, and meet people. And one of the things I discovered along the way, access to rural healthcare has been a problem for a very long time. In the 50s, in Minocqua, Dr. Kate Hollow actually started a penny campaign where they raised 1.7 million pennies, so that's $17,000, to fund the first rural hospital in the Woodruff area. Before that, people had to travel to Ironwood and other larger cities. So access to rural healthcare isn't something new. This has been going on for a long time. She actually used to snowshoe out to people to provide care, which is a pretty wild story. The clinic in Prentice, Wisconsin, in Price County, small clinic, is closing and being consolidated. Our small independent pharmacies are closing and being consolidated. This is not right, and we need to make sure that we are keeping these places open and accessible for people throughout the entire district. Reforming PBMs is going to be a great step to ensuring that our small independent pharmacies can stay relevant. And we also need to take a look at the model that is closing these small clinics down and reform that so that they can stay viable.
Thank you. With the close of this section, you have an additional 30 seconds per candidate at this time for any final thoughts on either of the last 2 questions related to mental health and rural hospitals. So with that, I will start with Ginger.
Mental health and rural hospitals. What I want to say is we need to incentivize those professionals to come to rural communities. There's already other professions that are doing that, that have modeled that. Congress needs to support that. Congress can provide financial incentives to do so. We need to go from being in crisis to general regular care and get to where our tribal friends are in treating health and wellness. My dad, no, we're not gonna talk about my dad. All right, I'll tell him.
I just reiterate what I said before. You need to be mentally and physically healthy to work, if that's what you're capable of doing and want to do, not the other way around.
I really want to make sure that we are instilling a healthy mentality in our society as well. And that all stems in education and in eating healthy and having good quality food and access to good nutrients and ingredients and groceries. That's where a lot of it stems from. So I want to make sure that we are putting a focus on that and that our schools are putting good food into the mouths of our children, because like our fields and our cows, with good nutrition, good food, we get a good product.
You know, farming and farm economy is such a driver to rural prosperity. And we can think about, you know, I think about anyway, rural communities, you know, in order to be prosperous, we need good schools, we need good healthcare, we need housing, we need quality public spaces. We want to make communities where people want to live. These are all essentials. They're not nice to have, but it requires investment. And if we don't make those investments, our rural communities are not going to remain livable. And that's the future we need to work for.
Thank you. With that, we're going to transition into the questions that were submitted by attendees and people that are registered for this event, so the people in this room. And the first question will be, name one agricultural issue where you disagree with your own party on and explain why. So I will start with Chris Armstrong.
Interesting question, and I guess I'll answer it with a non-answer. I don't care. Namely, what the current policies of the Democrat Party with respect to agriculture in some ways are irrelevant. They may or may not be my policies, but you know, as I represent you, they need to be your policies.
I would say I think one of the biggest things I disagree with my own party has to do with these tariffs. Unfortunately, a lot of administrations and our presidents, not just this current one, but past ones, have been using executive order more and more and more to try to further their own agendas without actually getting the input of the representatives and therefore getting the input of us before making those decisions. And so, because the tariffs were enacted through executive order, it created a lot of volatility and uncertainty in our markets and hurt a lot of people, and we never really got a say in whether that was something that we actually wanted or not. And so that is definitely something that I disagree with, and we need to make sure that we are going back to having Congress actually representing us on a lot of these issues and making those decisions on whether we do implement certain policy or not, instead of it solely being decided by an individual and then getting reversed through the courts because it was unconstitutional or whatever the reasoning might be. And we had this in the past with the student loan forgiveness that the Biden administration is trying to do, and so now we have it with the tariffs here. So I think that is a fundamental thing that we need to look at, and to make sure that Congress is actually holding the executive branch accountable like they are supposed to, and it is in their job description to do so.
Well, as a Democrat, I really wanted to have the Democratic Party remember that we have a farm economy, and a huge part of Wisconsin is a farm-dependent set of communities. And for a long time, I think the Democratic Party had lost presence in rural areas, and now we're beginning to see candidates emerge who understand farm issues and who represent farm communities. And I want to help the party, along with people like Gillian Bettino, to help the party get back to those roots of a party that did represent farmers and working people. I think there's a lot of folks in the Democratic Party today who give lip service to farm issues, but maybe don't understand farm issues as well as we'd like everybody to. And that's something Republicans and Democrats need to work together to do. I'll leave it there.
90 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
So, I like Chris's answer. I think that that's what you need to hear, is that you will have an independent voice. The Democratic Party will have, well, the House of Representatives will have 435 people there. It's not 50 like senators, because each one who's there is supposed to represent the demographic of the district. And District 7 in Wisconsin is rural. So I need to represent what's important to rural Wisconsin, to do my job, to give back to the people who are trusting me with their vote. And so Niina has a lot more material to work with on what she doesn't like. I don't even know what the Democrats are doing for farmers right now, and I think that's the problem. I think that one of the reasons I've been able to attract Republican and independent supporters is because they've all felt ignored for a really long time. I grew up when farmers were all solid blue Dems, and I recognize that that has changed. I think it's because people have felt ignored for far too long, so I'm working on developing systems, including access to an app that allows people to give me a heads up on what their thoughts are as I go in to vote on a bill. That accountability to be available to you. I think that's what you need, is someone who's going to be your voice. As a lawyer, that's what I do, I advocate for clients.
Thank you. Many eligible conservation applications, such as USDA's NRCS Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, and Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP, are not funded each year because the demand exceeds the available funding and staffing shortages. If elected, how would you address this shortfall? And we'll start with Niina for this question.
Can you read that, because there are a lot of acronyms in there at the beginning?
So applications to conservation programs like USDA's NRCS is like the NRCS for USDA's Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. Two federal programs through NRCS and USDA are not funded each year because the demand exceeds available funding and staff shortfalls. If elected, how would you address this shortage?
Okay, so you're saying the applications for funding to these programs are not being, basically approved or met or
Accepted each year, because there's just not enough
Okay.
money, not enough people to work on all of the applications.
Yeah. Well, if we're gonna offer programs, we better make sure that we can actually, fulfill them and, do what we've said that we're going to do. And so when you can't actually, submit applications or, have them reviewed because of staffing shortages, even though we have this program in place, that is a failure. And that's happening in a lot of different areas, and we're seeing shifts in our funding to have other priorities. I want to use a specific example with the National Science Foundation. They have shifted the priorities of their funding to go towards more artificial intelligence. They used to prioritize funding ecological, natural sciences-based research, and this is the first year in 40 years they have not made that a priority, unfortunately. And so I want to make sure that we are prioritizing those things, because that is what the basis of our economy is up here. Our natural resources, conservation, that is everything that makes the Northwoods special, and we need to make sure that those programs are continuing and that they're not sort of stalled out by cuts, but still having them around. That does not make sense.
And so, working as a forester for a lot of years in Wisconsin, I also worked with a lot of the NRCS programs like EQIP and Conservation Stewardship. And I ran an organization, Wisconsin's Green Fire, that focused on environmental policy, and I learned a lot about the farm side of that too. So, these programs are all intended to protect soil, protect water, protect habitat for wildlife. Those are all conservation benefits the American taxpayers are investing in with these programs. But one of the really big problems is that often that money gets spent in a way that we don't really know if we receive those benefits. Conservation projects get installed that may be cost shared, and often the NRCS doesn't have the ability to even follow up or make sure those practices got maintained or that they're actually generating benefits. So I think there's a lot more we could do with program design to make sure that the dollars being spent are actually generating conservation benefits. And you can't do that when you fire or get rid of as much as a third of the staff in the USDA and in our federal agencies. And a whole lot of people got purged out of the USDA in the last year and a half, just like almost every other federal agency. So we could put more money into those programs now, and we should, but that money won't be able to be spent effectively if we don't have skilled people who are working in those agencies, working with producers and growers and landowners to make sure that practice money is spent wisely.
education, and by the way, this is a good time. I appreciate your triad of recognizing education as your foundation, cooperation, and legislation as your model on how to accomplish your goals. My education included, as I said, the antitrust, and when I was in law school, for 2 years I studied environmental law, became the environmental law president, got a scholarship to go to an environmental summit in Washington, D.C. Sometimes conservationists and farmers are at odds with each other, but you have more in common than you have that divide you. And these programs were set up to incentivize farmers to cooperate with environmentalists and conservation efforts. And they do speak to the things that I've been talking about all along, like being able to rent the big equipment if you don't want to purchase the big equipment through eQuip. It talks about, you know, protecting and the nutrient-rich soil for farmers and not allowing, you know, what I would say not allowing data centers to build there. Not inhibiting farmers by wanting to use sustainable, renewable energy like solar power and wind power. Like there's a way that we can get everyone to the table to make that work without inhibiting or prohibiting your growth as farmers. It's sort of that collaborative effort which makes me a good mediator. We have to work together. The slogan is better together.
Well, something like my fellow panelists have said, we gotta restore the funding, the sledgehammer this administration has been taking to the USDA is very, very, very troubling, whether it has to do with, Farm Service Agency, Forest Service research stations. I mean, it's pretty darn clear what this administration's priorities are. In my opinion, is they're probably doing this illegally. So I just think, farmers, you guys are, out there working the land, every single day. You guys know what's going on. You guys want to take good care, of our air and our earth and our water. And I think that, the federal government needs to be a big, partner, particularly given, the rural nature of this district and how, again, in my opinion, this is one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and we need to, preserve and make investments in it so that we can honor those that, led us to this point in time, and we can leave it in a better shape as we move forward for future generations.
Thank you. How would you address wolf delisting to improve the situation for farmers and manage the wolf population? I will start with Brad.
All right, well, wolves in Wisconsin are a conservation success story. And, we had 0 wolves in this state up until about the 1970s. They were extirpated, they were hunted out in the 50s. And wolves have recovered to the point where they've exceeded every benchmark by the Endangered Species Act. They've been long overdue for delisting. So it is high time to delist wolves so that the state can manage wolves. And I live in one of the regions of the state in Bayfield County that has the highest rate of wolf depredations primarily on livestock. Because there's a lot of cattle up in that region. So it's a real deal. It's a real deal if you're farming. But there are things that you can do also to minimize those losses. But producers' hands are tied when wolves are listed as an endangered species, and we're unable to use lethal control or hunting as a tool for managing that population. So it's time to delist, it's time for state management, it's time for a regulated hunt, it's time to give producers the ability to deal with problem wolves when that occurs. And we can do that while sustaining a healthy population of wolves that brings balance and provides ecological benefits that most citizens want to see.
Fred and Chris and I have been doing this for a long time together, and usually we agree on most issues, and they're great people. I'm going to say we're going to take a little fork in the road here. I want to help farmers fend off predators to your livestock. Make no mistake about that. I am also very mindful of the extreme significance of the wolf to our indigenous friends. I am a lawyer, and I can't tell you what for certain the numbers are. What I have done is I have asked my roommate from college, who's at the bureau level of the DNR, where are the numbers at? And she said, it depends who you ask. I said, what can we do about a hunt? Can we have a control hunt? And she's like, no, we keep losing our funding at the DNR. You open that up for a hunt, we are not going to be able to regulate it. Last time we opened it up for a hunt, you had 72 hours to report it. The tribe was able to take 50% of the harvest. The non-tribe was able to take the other 50%. The tribe took none, and the non-tribal members went well beyond what they were allocated. The state is not in a position to regulate a hunt because they don't have funding in their DNR, which they draw funds from the USDA. There needs to be a cooperative effort. My daughter, who's an environmental scientist, has other plans to help farmers that I will put on my website, because I'm not time.
I'm not in favor of delisting the gray wolf, although I'm not a endangered species expert. So, as a scientist with my degree in astrophysics and my profession as an enterprise architect and a systems engineer, don't want to ignore scientific data. But again, as Ginger said, the history of the last con was, made it pretty clear the state is not able to manage or regulate it. Perhaps that could change with better funding or oversight. And this might be a little bit of naivete on my part, so pardon me for being frank, but what do you expect when you draw, raised cattle in an area with apex predators? It's gonna happen. My understanding is the huge, horrible bill actually covers 100% of predation losses. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I read. And I know there may be other solutions if you are, committed to, raising cattle and again, same thing have to do with pets and other livestock. That maybe there's some, subsidization and investment for, fencing and other protective measures.
I support delisting the gray wolf here in Wisconsin, and Fred articulated the reasons as to why extremely well. And actually, my position on this was really brought to me by somebody who's in this crowd who took the time to actually educate me on this topic and run me through all the numbers. And she had conducted her own studies as well, and really brought a new perspective on this topic for me. And so I just want to say I appreciate her for that. And maybe Chris, if you want to learn more, I bet she'd be happy to tell you more about the topic as well. And so, like Fred said it very well, so to say, not repeating myself, I do support delisting the gray wolf.
Okay, well, with that, to be cognizant of time, we're going to move into closing statements. So each of you will have 2 minutes now, a little more time, to give a closing statement to the attendees here, and those who we watch later on home. So I will start with Ginger.
Can I have just a minute? So
Yeah.
I can look at my notes.
Yeah.
How long do we have for closing statements?
2 minutes.
Sorry, I missed that.
And how much to talk?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, sorry.
Thank you.
I want to share with you that I was born in Eau Claire and raised in Forest County. I went away to get a degree from UW-Madison. I started in poli-sci, but then I heard about everybody was so corrupt. We talked about Watergate, and I changed my major to behavioral science and law. And then I went to law school. When I was finished, I came back to Forest County. The Northwoods is who I am. It's where I grew up, it's where I was raised, it's where I got my education. I ran once before in the year 2000 when Senator Bresky came to my door and asked me to run for assembly. I had the benefit of campaigning all summer with Dave Obey, Herb Cole got involved, Russ Feingold got involved, all the Dems rallied. I was also planning to get married, so I had a very busy summer. I'm pleased to report one of those things went very well, and I've been happily married most days for 27 years. Having children wasn't easy for us. It took longer than expected, and I had a very difficult pregnancy. All about women's reproductive rights. Also, my husband and I realized that our priority was raising our girls. And so I didn't get into politics while I had children at home. My 23-year-old is now an environmental scientist. She missed my launch because she was at mandatory chainsaw training. My other child is finishing up her degree in international business. Neither one of my daughters wants to have children. And again, I'm all about choices for reproductive health. If your reason is based on good reasons. Let me say this. My girls don't believe Mother Earth can support many more generations and don't believe having children is affordable. Those are reasons I think we owe to our next generation to fix. I'm done talking. I can never get it done in 2 minutes.
So I started this voyage last year in February 2025. So after Trump was sworn in, the flurry of illegal and unconstitutional executive orders came out, and Elon Musk was taking a sledgehammer to the federal government. I was sitting in my house going, what the hell is going on? Why isn't anybody doing anything about it? And so what I did is I took to the streets, made up a protest sign, went down to the busiest intersection in Richmond, Wisconsin, and protested by myself because I just had to do something. Even though I knew it was performative, it was rather cathartic. And then with the election of Susan Crawford approaching in April 2025, I'm like, I just can't sit on my butt, cross my fingers, and hope everything works out. So I got involved in the local Democrat Party, started knocking on doors to get the vote out. Then I ended up starting New Richmond Indivisible with other local organizers, and so we've been doing our part to resist this authoritarian fascist regime. Then I decided, after attending some more meetings, to join this race, again as the first candidate in April 2025. And a foundation of my platform, I'm sure people are surprised I haven't brought it up yet, is pretty simple. The rule of law and the Constitution. And what that means is that Donald Trump and his cabinet must be removed from office. And what is the point, when I go to Congress, quite honestly, of passing any new laws when this administration does not obey the law? There is a constitutional accommodation for this. It's called impeachment, and it must be done. There is nothing more important. I believe 2026 is the year of the people, and there is nothing we can't do when we work together to demand change.
I've been sitting for so long. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're good. Oh, you got your timer.
Yeah,
That's
shut the hell up, Chris.
Sorry, now you through. I was like, I got this all figured out. Okay, I can pull it back together. No. If we want to change the type of people, if we want to change how Congress works, we need to change the type of people we are sending to Congress. The average cost of a congressional race is $2 million. That really changes who runs for office. You either have to be extremely politically connected or independently wealthy and accept a lot of money from a lot of special interests. That's not what a representative should be. A representative's job is to represent the people in the district. It shouldn't be elected based on who can run the biggest ad campaign. And a couple of my Republican opponents who are not here today are doing that, running the biggest ad campaigns they can do. While I am out here, I biked 400 miles to this district to truly meet people and get to know these communities. I am actively engaging in genuine and real conversations with people here every day. I truly care about this district in the Northwoods. One of my opponents moved here to run after losing in her district. Another has zero experience and is 26 and has tons of money being flooded and has never done anything. I don't even think he knows how to touch a cow, okay? And that bothers me, and that really bothers me. Because it's like, a representative should be someone who really cares about the district and wants to represent their people. I'm a moderate Republican candidate. I am not taking any corporate PAC money, and my first and foremost goal is to represent the people here in this district. I am not a rubber stamp candidate, and I am going to put the priorities of the people here first and foremost over everything else.
All right, we started a trend. It's really been a pleasure working with all of you and the occasional other candidate in this race who shows up. Quick note on wolves. I wrote a paper about the 2021 wolf hunt that I'd love to share it with you all. It was a mess. Ginger, you're quite right about that, but we can do better and we have to. You know, so many people in this state, especially in politics, spend so much time celebrating our farm culture. And we all went to dairy breakfast last month, and it's wonderful. But we're doing that while we are losing farms at one of the fastest rates that we've ever had. And we're entering another farm crisis. And if we're serious about celebrating farming and supporting farming, we got to get serious about that crisis and the serious changes it'll take to address it. I've lived and worked in farm country, both as a conservationist, as a business owner, and as a state legislator. And I would like to bring that experience to you all in Congress. I'm not a career politician, but it's not my first political rodeo either. I'm the only candidate in this race who has served in elected office as an elected representative. And I would bring that experience representing a rural mixed political community to the 7CD, which is exactly what that is. Because any candidate, as a Democrat who's going to win this race, is going to have to swing a whole lot of Republican votes in order to do it. I built an incredible team to help run this campaign. I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of the over 1,500 financial supporters that we've had from the state of Wisconsin, because like Niina, I've made a commitment not to accept PAC money. And I've been honored to be endorsed by mayors, by county supervisors, by tribal leaders, and by former members of Congress, including David Obey. And it would be an honor for me to go to Congress and fill those big shoes and represent everybody in northern Wisconsin. I would love to have your support to do that. Thank you.